get your laser. Good evening. I'm Charlie Huntington. Welcome to Money Matters. I am a board member with BioStrategy Partners as well as a co-founder of BioStrategy Partners. We are a not-for-profit focused on helping young life science companies grow their pre-seed companies. I want to remind our viewers that from time to time, financial issues relating to life science or healthcare matters or companies may be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should be not viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since this program is pre-recorded and shown at a later date, please keep in mind that the information may be dated. You should always check with your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. I want to remind our viewers that they can send questions, which we will answer on upcoming shows, to Money Matters at 205 East Levering Mill Road, Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, 19004, or they can email their questions to moneymatterstv@gmail.com. I'm very pleased this evening to have my partner with me, co-host Kimon Hatza. Welcome, Kimon.
Thanks, Charlie. Happy to be here.
Kimon is a business attorney and a partner at MillCrest Law in Radnor, Pennsylvania. His focus is in the life science, healthcare, and information technology areas. It's also with great pleasure that we want to welcome Deni Zodda. Deni got his Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Villanova, his PhD in Biology from Notre Dame, his MBA in Marketing and Finance from Santa Clara University. He is a certified licensing professional, and over the past 30 years, he has served such positions as Director of New Products Marketing at Wyeth. He was Senior Director of Business Development at Cephalon, Managing Director and Head of Biopharmaceutical Corporate Finance and Business Development at KPMG. Deni was Senior Vice President of Business Development at Discovery Labs, Senior Vice President of Business Development and Chief Business Officer, Acting CFO of Novodel Pharmaceuticals. He is founder of Medignosties, LLC, and he is president of Differgen, a company focused on a cure for leukemia. Welcome, Deni.
Well, thank you very much for having me today, Ivan and Charlie.
It's a pleasure.
Deni, listening to that, listening to your background, it's amazing to me. Charlie and I have been doing this show for about 3 years, and it's taken us about that long to have people from all those different kinds of positions on the show, which we've been trying to do diligently. But your background makes you sort of the poster boy for life sciences in the Philadelphia ecosystem.
Well, thank you for that comment.
Your career has spanned from large pharmaceutical companies to specialty companies to startup companies, and you're currently the president of Differgen, as Charlie had mentioned. I was wondering if you could tell our viewers how you first found out about Differgen.
Well, I first found out about Differgen, not necessarily as a company, but the technology behind the company as part of the QED program through the University Science Center.
Okay.
That program is designed to provide funding in a competitive funding atmosphere for technologies coming out of many of the academic institutions in the Philadelphia area. Temple University, College of the Sciences, Jefferson, Penn, and so forth.
Aren't there? I think there are about 40 in that University Science Center system that go everywhere from South Jersey down to Delaware.
Correct. Over the evolution of the program over 5 years, it's come from being very Philadelphia-centric to be more regional in its approach in attracting those technologies. But basically, as I said, it's a competitive program, and what the objective is to provide funding to these technologies to help de-risk the scientific and commercial aspects of these technologies. In a sense, it's very early stage translational research that is being funded. And it's competitive from the standpoint that a large number of technologies are nominated by the academic institutions, and it's whittled down through a process involving people from the industry, from the financial or the funding areas of the industry, to a core group of 10. And then that's where a person such as myself gets involved. I am what's called a business advisor. And so basically there is a session where all of the inventors or the present their wares or present their technologies. And as business advisors, we sit there.
From these 10 finalists.
From these 10 finalists. We sit there, we listen to the presentations, and we select which ones that we feel our expertise could be most beneficial to the technology in terms of advising around what the scientific program should be and what the commercial program should be in the proposal that goes for the funding. And so we, once the matchup occurs, then we work with them for about 3 months to put a final proposal together, and then that proposal goes in, and again, a team of individual or a group from the Science Center and industry reviews these proposals. There is a presentation by the inventor of the proposal, so a 10-minute show, which is just like any type of presentation to a potential investor, and 4 or so, depending upon the situation, technologies become winners. And our responsibility as business advisors for those winners is we work through or work with the inventor over the following year for where the funding is applied to, again, help them manage the process as well as building more information around the commercial, potential commercial success of the resulting product. And so,
ask a question. So you have 10 finalists. Are most of the companies being represented, say, by PhDs that may have happened, they were doing some experiment, mm-hmm. and now they're hoping to commercialize mm-hmm. that experiment, and then maybe they have, for lack of a better word, outgrown their skill set, they're looking for helpers, they need funding. Is that where you guys get involved?
Well, basically, first of all, it's not companies.
Okay.
Right? It's the actual technology and the inventor behind the technology. And since they're coming from academic institutions, we're dealing with a combination of PhDs and or MDs.
Okay.
All right, as the inventors behind those technologies. And they're nominated because already the academic institution feels there is some potential value here, that further investment would move you further into the value chain or the de-risking chain. We provide, as business advisors, those skill sets which are not normally found in the inventor entrepreneurs that represent these technologies. Sometimes we're surprised, though, and around that there is some knowledge. But again, we have the first-hand knowledge from the industry of relating to the product development process and the licensing/funding process. They give advice on, you need to get to here, or you need to demonstrate this in order to have that de-risk of the technology and the recognition of the potential commercial reward for a successful product that comes out of that technology.
Mm-hmm. So once the financing, if a company is awarded the financing piece, what happens after that?
Okay. Well, actually, again, please allow me to correct. It's not companies. These are.
Sorry.
Right.
The technology. I meant
the
to say
technology.
You have the individual.
That's an important distinction.
It is an important distinction at this point in time, and then I'll link that into the difference of the story. So you have this funding for a year, and you're doing this work. Right now, the technology transfer office at the academic institution could be out there already, seeking a license or some sort of partnership with a company or a funding source that mm-hmm. could drive the longer term. Mm-hmm. But again, given the structure of what's happening in the life sciences, especially in the therapeutics area, there's what's called this valley of death, where you just don't have enough information or data to give the potential partners and funders a comfort level that's been de-risked. So that's where, again, the QED program helps with that, develop some of that information.
Okay.
Right? So at the end, after the 1 year, you will have a data set that you look at and say, okay, this puts us in a position to try to do this. All right. Then again, going back to the issue of the valley of death, is that sufficient to really get people interested? And we can go into a very long discussion of how far along and what it takes to attract a business partner and so forth. And, all right. The generalization is very early stage product-oriented programs are difficult to finance before you start gaining some clinical data or at least preclinical data, a level of preclinical data that just the preponderance of evidence supports that you can move forward. So,
if I may, the other critical element, which may be overstating the obvious, if they don't know you, you better show them someone they know. And in case you all, I would think the committee who are going to be judging these 10 and helping mentor these 10, maybe the judging happens differently or is a different part of the process on which finalists may be awarded the money, but you all have expertise and the industry knows you, and I would think that would be helpful in getting them over this valley of death.
yes.
Or at least put the odds in their favor.
Well,
right?
Put the odds in their favor of, number one, just advising them of what they need to do, what the industry looks for. And one of the things, actually, that we did as part of the program that I was involved with that led to Differgen was actually call up some colleagues in the industry and say, for this type of product or this type of disease, all right, what is the level of data that you would like to see? What are the types of data you would like to see that would interest you, assuming that this fits strategically with your company and so forth? So we can take those relationships, take that information, take our experiences, and incorporate it into that. So that is ultimately the value of a business advisor, or not a scientific advisor per se. Right. But we can also, and you look at many of these business advisors, they come from a background similar to as I have, where I have a scientific training and business training, and both scientific and business experience in the industry.
It sounds like with that technology you're talking about there, Deni, you were sort of able to play both sides in the sense that, one analogy we might use is the best way to get a good grade on the test is for the teacher to tell you, here's how I'm going to grade the test, right? So you go to the teacher and you say, here's what I'm looking for, or what are you looking for? And then you can go back to the pupil and say, here's how you study for the test.
And it's no different than, if the technology has moved along that you're now looking for investors from the outside, all right, equity investors. One of the questions that they ask nowadays is, have you discussed this? Not necessarily that you pursued an agreement, but have you discussed this with potential business partners and received feedback on what they believe should be done and what their perceived value of the product could be? All right. Again, very early stage type of information, but it goes to credibility. One of the difficulties that there is around the development of science into products is, first of all, removing yourself from the science. It's the product that's important. Ultimately, the marketplace doesn't care what the science is. Is this a product that can bring better, cost-effective health care?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm focused right now in my discussion on the life science arena. So you have to be more sophisticated in approaching those issues with potential investors because they're looking at that end game more than they used to look at that in the past.
Now this technology is a technology that came out of Temple University.
So specifically around Differgen, all right, during that process where the 10 companies are giving presentation, personally I look for things where I believe, because it starts with myself at this moment, not to be egotistical about it, but where I believe that the resulting product can have a dramatic impact upon the outcomes for patients.
So it's not a me too.
It's not a me too. I have very hard feelings about where Me Too products fit in the marketplace today. So I look for those highly innovative, dramatic improvements. And so, it was very interesting because we all, especially when dealing with early stage companies and advice to early stage companies, it's the presentation. Right, everybody goes that 10-minute first 10-minute to half-hour presentation to the potential investor is, you have to be very sophisticated about it and so forth. And you see some of these scientists getting up there and trying to do that, but they've had no advice, and so they're very long scientific descriptions, and they really don't discuss about the product. What was interesting is in this particular situation, the inventor gets up, all right, a Dr. George Tazinski from Temple University, and he didn't have any slides with him. All right, and I could see my colleagues in the room going, all right. He started giving his presentation, and I heard three things. One, his passion for what he was doing. Two, his understanding of what was going on in terms of the details. No slides, but he was able to present without slides all the details. But number three, he said a word, or actually two words: leukemia and differentiation. And when he said those words, I said to myself, that's a unique combination. And the reason is, right, if everybody, I don't know how the audience is familiar with leukemia, but it's what's called a blood cancer, right? The leukemic cells, which are cells that have not, white blood cells that have not matured properly, are in your bloodstream. They're non-functional, and you're very susceptible to a number of diseases, such as infectious diseases and other things. And so the present therapy in the particular type of leukemia that we're interested in, which is called acute myeloid leukemia, is the use of very toxic chemotherapeutic agents. Combined with that, the average age for diagnosis of this disease is in the 60s. Comes together with the majority of the potential patient population cannot tolerate the therapy. The therapy in its own right could kill them, as well as just overall the success rate with this therapy. And these therapies are designed to kill cells. You go back in the early days of oncology therapies, right? The idea was if we almost killed the patient, we could kill off the cancer first before we kill off the patient.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so, it sort of goes back to that theory. And so what I heard when I heard differentiation is we're not trying to kill the cells, we're trying to change them. We're trying to change them into a more normal cell. All right? And therefore, you get a number of advantages. One advantage is if this works in combination with chemotherapy, but we can lower the chemotherapy doses that are given, now a wider patient population is eligible for therapy.
Makes sense.
So the hope for better outcomes. Also on a personal level, George came off as being somebody very easy to work with, that we could have a good back and forth relationship. Because again, one of the things when you look at potential investors in a company and so forth, they're going to look at the management team, right? They're going to look at the credentials of the management team, but they're also going to look at attitudes. And there are many situations where you have a scientific founding CEO who has this my way or the highway, or I'm the expert, you're right, who has, for lack of a better phrase, an arrogance about them that, turns off potential investors. So, I saw the ability to work with George as well as how George could play to investors in a proper role.
I would think the reason why the converse style to what you're describing, George, as being would be, we know that most science which is started is not the same result,
yes,
right, that we wind up finishing with. So if there's complete inflexibility on the part of the original scientific founder, That's a non-starter to most investors.
That is also part of the equation. So we won the QED competition, all right, and started a program. There was one thing, though, that was in my mind was, okay, well, at the end of the year, 1 year, we're going to have these data. We moved it along. And everybody's going to then sit there and go, well, that's nice. What do we do next?
Right.
And Temple has the choice to go out and license it. All right. George has the choice to get more funding to develop it within. I sat there and said, okay, if we're really going to move this along, and the whole premise of a QED project is to develop it towards develop the technology or the product, towards commercialization, is we need to look at what are we going to do on day 366. And so one of the things that we did was to actually incorporate Differgen, or actually form an LLC around Differgen, and then put together a strategy around now how we can get some further funding. And that led to one thing, which is actually from BioStrategy Partners, was a double helix grant.
Explain to our viewers what that is, please.
Well, as you said earlier, BioStrategy's partner strategy is to support seed funding or companies seeking pre-seed companies. Two aspects to it was, first of all, having access to experts, again, people such as myself, but even scientific experts, legal experts, and so forth, that could provide advice to these young companies around their business plan and their presentation to potential investors prior to going to them and either sinking or swimming. Mm-hmm. All right. The second part about it is there was funding from the state, all right, that was provided to BioStrategy Partners, that they can give grants to some of the companies. And so we wrote a grant proposal around our technology. And by the way, I haven't described it in detail, but it's basically a protein, right? It's a biotechnology product for the treatment of acute myeloid leukemia. So we got a grant that allowed us to investigate another aspect, all right, of the potential application of the technology or the protein, right, in the treatment of leukemia. All right, so another incremental step in enhancing, all right, our database. The other thing that we put in place is that we went and pursued a grant from the United States through the SBIR program, the Small Business Investment Research Program. And our application, given it's an oncology product, was to the National Cancer Institute. And we basically received a grant starting middle of last year. With two objectives. One is to demonstrate that we can take the technology or take the ability to manufacture the protein from George's lab and put it into a manufacturer or a site that is consistent with the capabilities a manufacturing site would have for proteins used in therapeutics. And two, to extend our database in two aspects. One is to replicate some of George's work, all right, at another lab, as well as now do a large number of animal studies to demonstrate the biological and potential clinical activity of the protein. Allow us to check off some boxes relative to when somebody evaluates a potential investment. Is the technology replicable? Yes. Can the technology be manufactured? Yes. Yeah, right.
Because you've done it in two different labs.
Those two things. And then the third one is, does it have the desirable biological activity relevant to clinical endpoints? Yes. So we'll have those. And so coming this summer, when we have all these data together, we come to our next decision point, all right, of how do we further fund the company.
So back up, if you would, for just a minute. So walk us through the timeline, roughly, of when did the University City Science Center say you're one of the 10 to, is the year up at this point? And then when the funding started, so just walk us through And then let's walk right into the funding question.
So it was the summer of 2010 where the Science Center had selected the 10, of which Georgia's technology was part of it. It was in the fall of 2010 when we went through the process of building the plan and putting the formal proposal into the QED program. Our funding approval was in the early winter, and funding appeared on the checkbook was filled at Temple in beginning of 2011.
Okay.
All right. We formed Differgen towards the end of 2011. We put our first SBIR filing in early 2012. The BioStrategy Partners funding was mid 2011.
Okay. Okay. We have probably about 3 minutes left right now. And Steve Nappy from Temple has been a guest here. How have you interacted with Temple? Have they been, I would assume they've been a great partner, but what support have you received? How involved are they?
We're actually work very collaboratively with each other. Temple has really evolved from where it was 5-6 years ago.
You're housed there, or you're virtual?
We're a virtual company.
Okay.
We do use an address for one of the Temple properties for legal purposes.
Okay. George, is George still, he remames an employee at
George
Temple?
is now retired.
Retired, okay.
Retired from Temple. But we have an excellent working relationship with Temple, all right, with Steve and his team. And that's because they've created an atmosphere of collaboration with their scientists and with the companies that are, or entrepreneurs who are looking to do the science. And they're doing things such as helping in funding, helping develop relationships with other parts of Temple, which can bring services to bear to help in the programs and so forth. And they actually now have a person dedicated to develop those relationships.
That's great. That's great. Any last thoughts, Kimon?
We have probably about a minute before Charlie has to wrap up the show. If you could sum it up, what would success look like for Differgen?
Great question.
Well, ultimately, the success for Differgen would be, all right, that angiocytin is in the marketplace and is successfully treating acute myeloid leukemia patients, all right? And all of that's driven by data. So the next success point for us are the data that will come out this summer, all right, that can support us in getting some more funding either through grants, but also more importantly, can now support us going to potential investors. All right, data drives success in all of this. There's no argument that if you have bad data or it doesn't work, you're done. All right, you have to have good data and and keep evolving that data package. All right, that will bring in different levels of interest in the company and more financial strength to the company, so that we can hit that ultimate goal of bringing the product to the marketplace. Not necessarily as us, all right, but the product reaches the marketplace through an appropriate partner or channel.
Okay. Deni, you've been a great guest. I also want to thank my co-host, Kimon Hatza. Kimon, great job. And I want to remind our viewers that our next guest is Robert Milnes. He is an energy analyst. We'll be discussing things like master limited partnerships. I also want to remind you that Money Matters is now available as an audio podcast on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, listed as Money Matters, the podcast for mobile devices. The video is available on our YouTube channel as well as our website. Thank you and good night from Money Matters. Great job.